Hello, everyone. Welcome on this Wednesday, April the 1st. Glad to have you all here. We'll allow a little time for people to join. This is our webinar put on by Humin in partnership with Miraval. You can see a lot of people are joining still. This is great. Yep, keeping coming. Very good. Give it a minute or two more just to allow people to fully join, and then we'll get rolling. It's looking great. So, not sure where you're all coming from, but I'm based in the Midwest in the US, and I hope the weather is nice where you are. Right now, it's kind of gray here, but I don't mind that too much. Great. We're at about 160 people here, which is fantastic. From Poland, wow. California, Florida, all over the place. Wow, this is amazing. Brooklyn, New York, Nevada, New Zealand, Germany. Wow, there's a lot of people from all over the world. This is very exciting. Wisconsin, Idaho, Michigan. Wow, this is great. All right. I'm going to get things rolling here. I think people are still joining slowly, but let's get this show on the road. Like to introduce ourselves. This is a welcome all of you on behalf of Humin. Humin is a global nonprofit in well-being science. We were formerly named Healthy Minds Innovations, so that name may ring a bell for some of you. I'd like to introduce myself, first of all, Andrew Burroughs, Chief Experience Officer at Humin, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Tammi Kral, Director of Science. Tammi will come on camera here in a little bit. And also, very happy to have Simon Marxer here, Vice President of Wellbeing and Spa at Miraval Resorts and Spas. So,
Great.
welcome everyone. And we're going to have a great conversation here about some exciting research that's just been concluded. So, let's get rolling. I watched it. I don't know if you did, but if you've watched The White Lotus or you follow social media or related news stories, you know, like I do, there's a growing awareness, even hype around the power of wellness retreats to bring about this amazing transformational change in us as individuals. The idea that you can, whisk yourself off to an exotic location, immerse yourself in a whole series of relaxing and wonderful experiences, and then return home and you're refreshed, renewed, all that stress has melted away. I mean, it's just incredibly enticing. But we're here today with our science and our business hats on a little bit, just like, let's just ask some hard questions. I mean, the first one is, do they actually really deliver on that promise? Do they work? Can you believe what's said about these amazing experiences? And who do you trust for that kind of information? And then, as an individual, are they really worth the time, the travel, the investment? Whether it's you paying for it, perhaps you're lucky enough to have an employer who's going to send you to one of these places. Do these experiences really make sense? Do they actually move the needle in key aspects of our physical or mental well-being? Are they worth it? And then lastly, the benefits that you absorb while you're at one of these retreats, how long do they last? I mean, is it just that you get on the plane and all of a sudden you're back home again and it's melted away? The next day, can you feel the impact? What about the following week or even longer? So we have a lot of questions that we have been asking over the last couple of years about this kind of experience and Miraval as an experienced deliverer. And where do we turn for these kind of questions? I'd like to bring Simon into the conversation here a little bit, and maybe first of all, talk a little bit about someone who's never been to these resorts, for someone who's new to this. What kinds of activities and therapies and things are on offer, and what sets Miraval apart from maybe some of the other folks in this business?
Thanks, Andrew. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Um, Miraval offers so many things. I would struggle to cover them all with the time we have today, but the opportunity to discover and to revisit some of your favorite well-being supporting pastimes are on offer at Miraval from those who come and decide that the best way to support their well-being is to do very little and to sit by the pool and just chat with a friend, to those who see relaxation as going out and cycling 40 some miles and then coming and running 10. So there's a wide spectrum. But essentially, the day is filled with a variety of different classes. Many of the classes and activities are new to our guests. They haven't had a chance to experience them at home, and we strive to offer and introduce programming from yoga to meditation. With an equine program, we have obviously spa services where people can go and really relax and enjoy themselves. Challenge activities where we do high ropes, and one can design their own day. And author their own Miraval story by choosing the things that appeal to them. And I will say that what often happens is folks come expecting to do one set of activities, and then they discover how much more is available. And we always say that you arrive knowing what you want, and then you discover what you need, and then that really can lead to a satisfying experience.
Yeah, fantastic,
Yeah,
wonderful. When I think about who's on this call here today, there's two kind of very different worlds coming together here. We've got the world of science, hardcore science, which Tammy's going to talk about in a little bit here, and then spa resorts. I mean, they seem almost like they're on opposite ends of a spectrum, and yet somehow we found some common ground in the middle here. And I think that's interesting to reflect on for a second. I mean, I know from our point of view, we're a nonprofit organization, and we're focused on bringing well-being science out into the world for benefit of everyone. And actually, as we got to know you, Simon, and your organization, we started to realize that actually you have very similar goals. Maybe you want to talk about that for a second.
yeah, absolutely. I think I had the good fortune of being able to work with then HMI and really have some exposure to the quality of work and the level of science that you're generating around well-being science. And I think what really appealed to me most is the opportunity to apply that lens to an experience that I knew anecdotally, quite honestly, to be effective and quite powerful for our guests. But the opportunity to apply that level of science and the the nature of the depth of the results garnered was so impressive that I thought to understand the Miraval experience through that same lens would represent something incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I think we were very excited because, we're looking for ways which we can bring this work out into the world in different contexts. And, to find a partner like Miraval, you were willing to think very broadly and openly about what could be done and sort of having your business essentially opened up to examination by scientists, not something that I think everyone would necessarily sign up for. So we really appreciated your sort of, willingness to go along the journey with us, not necessarily knowing what you'd find at the end of that journey. So
Yeah.
um, I think. Let's see. I mean, I think one of the things that surprised us about this experience was that when we first started talking to you about this, um, you know, my impression was that, the hospitality industry is very large. Surely there are ways in which you can understand the effectiveness of what you're doing that already exist. And, do you even need our help for that? And I think in conversations with you, you kind of gave a different picture of sort of the state of the art
Yeah.
of measurement around something as nebulous as well-being, which, for many people it is hard to understand.
It is, and I think part of what I want to say to build on sort of your last question. I think the opportunity to understand the impact on consumers of any business is critical, and to go beyond satisfaction as the threshold. And I think traditionally. A satisfying experience has been seen as a successful experience. And what I would venture to say is it's not only for Miraval our guests seeking a sense of well-being. I would say now consumers are seeking a sense of well-being from every engagement with a brand, and leaving feeling a sense of fulfillment. And uh, I have very strong opinion of how important it is to understand the well-being impact of your experience, your service, even your product. And I think that hospitality as a whole has really looked through the lens again of satisfaction as the threshold for success. And I believe the frontier to be explored is the one that we worked with you and the team on, which is the well-being impact of your experience, and not only the immediate impact, but the lasting impact is also a big part of what I felt the Miraval brand promise represents, of creating a life in balance, and that really needs to extend beyond our doors and the shuttle to the airport. So it was a priority from my perspective to identify not just a well-being impact, but a lasting well-being impact.
Yeah, I mean, I think we started to understand that as we got into conversations with you, that ratings or satisfaction scores just don't deliver the kind of nuance that you needed to
Right.
understand how your business was affecting people and the long-term impact. I mean, I think as a non-scientist working with people like Tammy, I think I can appreciate that, well-being science really allows us to, take the hood off the engine, look inside, poke around, and make intangible aspects of an experience much more tangible, to kind of break it down into components and be able to separate different aspects of an experience out, and see how each one of those contributes to an overall feeling. And as Tammy will say, some of those things interact with each other, and how those things interact is really interesting. All of that is, far more complex to understand than, a simple satisfaction rating, for example, or even anecdotes that customers may leave you, don't necessarily give you the kind of rigor that you're looking for to say we can act on this. And I think one of the key things that science is trying to bring here is actionable data, things that you can look at and say this actually means we can make a decision around this, maybe for our business or for a new service we want to offer, or to boost something that's going on well, that's working well for your guests.
Yeah, and Andrew, I think it's also really a great opportunity to understand how might you evolve the experience. How can we take these learnings and evolve what we offer and how we offer it? And I think that is part of what helped me muster the courage to have a look under the hood and see what our true lasting impact was, and having that insight in an effort to promote a growth mindset of there's no bad feedback. It was all going to be valuable at the end of the day,
Yeah.
which it was.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we have to commend you for your willingness to take a risk on this, because I mean, we didn't know what we were going to find. We had good instincts based on all the things you've told us and what we've learned, but sometimes the science comes back in ways that you don't expect it to, and reveals things that you didn't want to hear, or don't know how to act on. So I think, this experiment or this journey that we've been on, this study that Tammy's going to share with us shortly here, really was an exercise in sort of being risk tolerant and willing to listen and hear all the feedback, no matter what that feedback looks like. And so, yeah, another thing that I think made your organization a very good partner is that willingness to not only focus on the things that are likely to come back with positive messages, but also just tell us everything, tell us all the data, and then we can go from
Right.
there. Um, yeah, I mean, I think we're going to transition over to Tammy here in a second here. I think, what we want to reinforce here is that, we're an independent organization. We were brought in as a measurement tool. I like to think of us as if you like, a scientific yardstick for measuring, products and services out in the world. And so, the results that we brought here and that we're sharing here today are things that really were done very, carefully, impartially, and with a lot of rigor. And Tammy's going to talk a little bit about that. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Dr. Tammi Kral into the conversation as, I would say, the true expert, especially in the science around what we're talking about here today, and have her walk through the design of the study and the results that were uncovered.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And it has been such a pleasure to work with, of course, Andrew and the Humin team, and Simon and the team at Miraval on this project. As a scientist, I've spent a lot of time working in the contemplative and well-being science spaces, but Miraval was totally new to me. And so I really got to put on that exploratory scientist hat and lead with curiosity. And it was just really fun to learn all about really the magic of what you do at Miraval. And so I came into this again with really no, expectations, and just a lot of curiosity. And it has been such a pleasure to work with you all in this journey. And so I'm excited to share with everyone a bit more about the science about what makes this study more than a customer satisfaction survey. And that's not to discount what you can learn from those sorts of surveys, and user experience and all that sort of stuff is really critical to understand, but it's just a different thing than a scientific study. And so I'm excited to tell you a little bit more about what that means. And so before I dive into the nuts and bolts of the study design, I'd like to describe a little bit about how we started this process, which, as I mentioned, I was new to Miraval, despite the fact that I've been in the well-being space, somewhat surprisingly, for my entire career. I was not familiar with it. And so it was really critical that we started with some in-depth interviews with the Miraval team. So our team at Humin met with the staff, the leadership, folks who are involved in the programming to really try to understand deeply what it is that they're cultivating at Miraval. What are these activities? What's the interaction like? What do they expect to see? And what might me think would be the mechanisms that might support those outcomes that they're expecting to see at Miraval. And so that was a critical piece for me to really gain that deeper understanding and really helped inform how we design the study. And so now I'm going to pull up a visual and just walk you through a little bit more about the scientific methods that we used. So for the study design, we combined these scientific methods, with what we call a naturalistic data collection. And so part of what was really cool about this project for me was taking scientific methods that I've used throughout my career and applying them to a real world context. So this study was done with real people in the real world who were guests planning to stay at a Miraval resort. And we worked really closely with the Miraval team of experience planners to make sure that everyone who was planning a stay at a Miraval resort during our study period was given the opportunity to participate in the study. So guests had an opportunity to opt in, and if they were interested in participating, then they received an anonymous link where they could complete a series of surveys. And so part of the method we used here that's different than a typical sort of satisfaction survey is we collected multiple measurements. And the first measurement we collected was before guest arrival at Miraval. And so 14 days prior to their arrival date, we sent them a link to complete a series of surveys. And these surveys measured the different outcomes that we expected might change as a result of their Miraval stay, but we wanted to measure it before they even arrived so we could kind of get that baseline. As you can imagine, different people have different levels of stress, different levels of well-being, and so we wanted to be able to control for that. So that's one aspect of the method we used. Another aspect is that we then collected the follow-up surveys at least 14 days after their departure. So the first post-day survey was sent 14 days post-departure, and they had a couple weeks to complete it. So that was the earliest point that we measured the impact of a Miraval stay. And again, it can be interesting and helpful to know what people experience during the stay, but the goal here was to really measure what's the impact of a Miraval stay on people's lives beyond the experience itself. And so the soonest outcome we had was 14 days post-departure. And then we sent a third survey out, again, collecting the same surveys at each time point. That was 60 days post-departure to try to see, are any of these outcomes still lasting further out, this sort of more long-lasting effect. And for the guests who were able to participate in the study, we had a total of 176 guests who completed all three surveys. And the average night stay was 3 nights. And so there was a range of both shorter and longer, but the average would be 3 nights. And another aspect that differentiated this study from a simple survey was that all of our materials and our study protocol, our design that I just described, was reviewed by a third party and external institutional review board. And this is basically just a group that is professionally trained and certified to make sure that you are following the ethical rules and guidelines and protecting your human participants. So that's a really kind of critical point of a scientific study. As I mentioned, we collected a series of surveys at these different time points. And I'll tell you briefly about each of those surveys now. And this is, again, another aspect that really differentiates a sort of scientific study from a simple satisfaction survey, which is that we used validated scientific measures that we pulled from the psychological and scientific literature. So again, based on those sort of initial interviews and the discovery work that we did, we were able to come up with a list of outcomes that we expected might change based on a Miraval stay. So the qualities that we and skills that we would expect to improve. And then we went to the literature to see what are some valid, established measures for those different outcomes. And so these are measures that have been used for years in the literature, including the Perceived Stress Scale, which is an NIH toolbox measure. It's a self-report of how much stress you feel in your day-to-day life. We measured self-efficacy using the new general self-efficacy scale, and this tells us about your belief in your ability to achieve specific goals. We use the Healthy Minds Index, which is a measure based on the Healthy Minds framework, which is a skills-based framework of well-being around 4 different domains. And I'll describe each of these in further detail as I review the results. And then finally, we use the 5-facet mindfulness questionnaire, which is an established measure to get at different aspects of mindfulness skills. And so these were all outcomes that we were expecting might improve following a Miraval stay. In addition to these validated measures, we also pulled from the psychological literature to then develop some custom measures of different aspects of the Miraval experience that we expected might sort of interact or might influence the outcomes that we see. So we looked at the level of belonging that guests felt while they were at Miraval, their feelings of community and emotional safety, and the staff authenticity. And these last 2 especially were added following our interviews with staff when it became really clear to us that those interactions that guests were having with the staff, especially at vulnerable moments, would be really critical to any sort of changes that we might see. And so that was a hypothesis that we had that led us to adding these measures. And one thing I learned about Miraval is that there's a significant number of guests who actually book their stay because they're going through some kind of major life transition. So a number of guests, not all, people have all different intentions of their visit, but there are a number who are experiencing big emotions, right? Going through these transitions and really engaging in activities to process what they're going through. And so that aspect of emotional safety seemed like a critical one to explore. So these are all the measures we used again, and we have the citations at the bottom here, which were pulled from the psychological literature. So that's another aspect of this that is a scientific method that we're applying to this naturalistic context. And so next I'll show you, we'll just dive right into the results. And I should mention that these measures, when I'm showing you the results, what we're looking at is the change in each of these measures from before the Miraval stay to after. And so one of the biggest effects that we saw was in terms of stress reduction. And so we saw significant decreases in stress on average across guests who stayed at Miraval. We found that the majority of guests had significantly reduced stress that persisted to at least 60 days post-departure. So again, that third survey was sent out 60 days after their departure date. They had a couple weeks to fill it out. So it might have actually lasted longer than that, but that would have been the date it was sent out. So that was pretty incredible. I was really excited to find that not only did we see these effects at the 14-day mark, where we saw the significant stress reductions, but that it persisted for 60 days was really incredible for me to see. And you can see at the top of the slide, there's an example of one of the questions from that stress survey. Again, this is the NIH toolbox measure, and it's looking at stress over the past week. And so again, the earliest survey we sent out was 14 days post-stay. And so we're looking at how stressed they felt, that second week after they've already returned, they're back to their life, their job, their family, whatever it is they're doing in their day-to-day life, their normal stressors. And we're still seeing these persistent reductions. In addition, we saw that guests who stayed longer, for each additional night that you stayed beyond the average 3 nights, there was a 30% larger reduction in stress. And so in the scientific literature, we refer to this as a dose response effect. And it really lends more evidence to this correlation between stress reduction and a Miraval stay to give us more evidence and that the correlation is really driven by the experience people are having at Miraval. Because the longer you stay, the better outcomes, the larger the reduction you see. So this was also a very exciting finding for me. In addition to the improvements in terms of reductions in stress, we also saw improvements in terms of positive outcomes. And so the first one I'll review is improvements in self-efficacy. So again, this is based on the measure that helps assess your belief in your ability to achieve goals. And so you can see an example item on this slide. When I face difficult tasks, I am certain I will accomplish them. And with regards to self-efficacy, we saw a significant improvement on average from before the stay to after of 5%. And this, again, is a statistically significant effect. And while 5 seems like a relatively small number in numeric terms, scientifically and humanly, this is actually really exciting and about the effect size that we would hope for. So in terms of these data, as I mentioned, it's an average of 3 night stay. So if you consider the human lifespan, right, to see 5% increase across 3 days, so you can imagine what is possible across a lifetime. So that was, in terms of the human lifespan, I think this is a significant improvement. The scientific significance is also there in terms of the context of the scientific literature. So if you look at established mindfulness interventions, oftentimes they're on the longer end, much longer than 3 days. But if you look at the shorter interventions that are about 1 week long, we see the same level of improvement. So we see about a 4 to 5% improvement in outcomes related to well-being with a 1 week mindfulness intervention. Similarly, with our partners at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, we've collaborated on a number of large scientific trials of Humin's Healthy Minds program app. And with our app, again, the typical intervention study is more like 30 days, but if you look at the 1 week change in well-being, it's also about 4 to 5%. And so these changes that we're seeing with a 3 night stay at Miraval being both statistically significant and humanly significant are really exciting. So I was really just, again, impressed and excited by these results. In addition to the improvements in the self-efficacy measure, we also saw improvements across all 4 domains of the Healthy Minds well-being framework. And so these include awareness, connection, insight, and purpose. And so I'll briefly just unpack each of those. So awareness has to do with skills like paying attention to the present moment, being aware of your environment, of your physical sensations, your thoughts, emotions, and that sort of thing. Connection has to do with interpersonal skills. So gratitude, kindness, appreciation. Insight has to do with self-knowledge, understanding how your different emotions, how your beliefs shape your experience of the world and shape your behaviors and interaction with other people. So really understanding how your perspective shapes how you show up in the world and also how it shapes your own identity. And then finally, purpose has to do with having clarity on your personal values and being able to align your day-to-day life with those values. And so following the Miraval stay compared to before, again, we saw significant improvements across each of these 4 domains. And on average, we saw about a 4% improvement across all guests. And again, that's for the average of a 3-night stay. Furthermore, we saw larger gains that were specific to the connection domain for guests who were traveling with others and for guests who felt supported by the Miraval staff when they were having those experiences of strong emotions. And so, again, this is particularly exciting to see these specific improvements in the interpersonal domain of connection related to when you're actually more connected in a positive way with other people and staff during your visit. And it shows really, again, how the staff at Miraval, and we'll see this repeatedly throughout the results, but how I think the qualities of the staff at the Miraval and what they're bringing to the experience are really heightening the impact that we're seeing on well-being. So this is just the first of many of those results. And then finally, we also saw larger improvements in well-being for guests who felt more belonging and community at Miraval and who rated the staff as more authentic. So again, you're seeing that those aspects of how those interpersonal aspects of the experience, what the staff are creating and how they're interacting with guests, that is really heightening the positive outcomes. In terms of mindfulness skills, we also see significant improvements, about 4%, from before the stay to after. And here we saw in terms of 3 specific mindfulness skills. This was measured using a standard survey from the literature called the 5-Facet Mindfulness Questionnaire. And we saw improvements in 3 domains. One domain is called non-reacting to inner experience. So this has to do with, for example, you're having an emotional experience and being able to sort of pause, step back, reflect, and respond rather than just sort of reflexively reacting. Acting with awareness has to do with behaving with intention and awareness to your surroundings. And then the ability to describe your experiences, which relates to being able to be mindfully present in the moment. So across all 3 of these skills, we saw improvements following the Miraval stay. And similar to the other domains of well-being that I just talked about on the previous slide, we saw larger improvements in these domains when guests felt a stronger feeling of belonging and community while at Miraval. So again, really seeing that additional impact of the interpersonal experience and the connections that they're having of feeling belonging, feeling community, and how that amplifies the positive impacts of the experience. We also saw larger improvements for guests who experienced a higher level of emotional safety. So again, highlighting that interpersonal aspect of the experience. All of the results I've talked about so far really have to do with skills and outcomes that are immediate to the individual. We also included job satisfaction as what we call a more distal outcome. So this is something that's a little further away from the individual. As you can imagine, your satisfaction with your job is influenced by many different factors, right? So what your work actually is, what your day-to-day is like, how your role with your manager is, right? There's lots of factors that influence job satisfaction. So this is one we had included as, as helpful, perhaps, if people are improving their well-being and their mindfulness and stress reduction and self-efficacy, perhaps we'd see downstream impacts on job satisfaction. But it was definitely a little further afield of an outcome to be able to measure a change in. And so I was particularly excited to see that we found a significant improvement of 4% increased job satisfaction following a Miraval stay. Because again, this was the earliest people could have completed this survey was a full 2 weeks after they had returned from Miraval. So they've been back in the job for 2 weeks, and they are reporting that they are more satisfied than when they had completed the original survey over a month prior to that. And so again, this is a very exciting finding. And while 4%, as the other percentages, is a relatively numerically small number, it is both humanly and statistically significant. So very exciting to see. I also want to highlight that we saw some larger improvements related to specific activities at Miraval. And the one that came out most frequently were the equine activities. And these are activities that involve interactions with horses. And we saw that of the guests who participated in these activities, they had larger improvements across most of the outcomes that we measured. So they had larger stress reductions, higher gains across all domains of well-being skills, as well as higher gains in the mindfulness skills. So this indicates that there might be something particularly beneficial about these equine activities for the outcomes that we're looking at. And so again, there was just a proportion of the guests among those surveyed who participated in these activities. So on average, all guests saw improvements in these outcomes. And those who participated in these equine activities simply had even larger gains. So a further heightening of the positive experience and outcomes that we're seeing. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the patterns that we saw in the data that I just wanted to pull out as well was the impact of different aspects of connections that people had, connections that were likely impacted with their interaction with other guests, as many of the Miraval activities involve group experiences. They can involve connections with the partners that they're traveling with, and as well as with the Miraval staff and the environment they're creating. So we saw repeatedly that aspects of community, belonging, feeling of staff being authentic in their interactions, all of those things further amplified the positive outcomes that guests experienced. And so this seems to be really a critical aspect of the Miraval magic that's helping to lead to these positive, statistically and humanly significant outcomes. And so while we saw guests who had the highest levels of these characteristics had the largest improvements, we also saw across the board that guests were really felt that they belonged and really felt positive during their experience at Miraval. So 95% reported feeling some sense of belonging, community, that the staff were authentic. And there were also 70% of guests who stated that they made new friendships during their stay. And that was really striking to me, and something, again, that we included just based on those discovery interviews where it became clear that this sort of group aspect and the connections people make during their stay might have an impact. And so to wrap up, I also want to highlight a few of the open-ended responses that we collected. So while we really focused on what we call the quantitative measures or the validated psychological surveys from the literature, we also included some open-ended questions to try to get a deeper feeling for what people experienced during their stay. And here I'll just highlight a few. And these are, again, we see these kind of similar themes throughout the data, but we asked people just simply, what did you learn about yourself during your stay? And this is something, again, following from our interviews, it seems that the types of experiences people have at Miraval they can be about relaxation, they can be about focused on many different things. But one of the strands that seemed to follow through many of the activities that we learned about and many of the different experiences that they're trying to cultivate there had to do with setting people up for growth, setting people up for self-understanding. And so this is what prompted us to ask this. And you can see the responses here I thought were just very striking and also mirror what we see in the validated survey data. So people feeling that they are capable, reminded that they can do hard things, that they're strong, also that they're grateful, and being able to identify different patterns in their thinking and behaviors that don't serve them. So I won't read through all of these, but just want to end on this to again highlight what I feel are very striking results, and just very grateful to be able to work on this project with Simon and the Humin team and everyone at Miraval.
Well, Tammi, thank you so much for presenting the results. Really amazing stuff to see there. A lot to comment on, and a lot of questions came in while you were talking, which we won't have a chance to answer all of them. Some of them are technical, some of them are just, lots of details and a lot of curiosity, I think, about how this research was done and how, and some of the aspects of the way in which it was conducted, and some of the results beyond what we even showed on the screen here. So maybe we can dig into some of those. Maybe we'll share a little bit of that when we do a more deeper follow-up by email later on. But thanks for the questions and thanks for the curiosity. Simon, I mean, when you look at this and when you saw these results for the first time, what are the kinds of things that stood out most for you in terms of like surprises or, like I knew it, or what kinds of reactions did you have when you saw this data?
Well, gosh, all of those things. I think the equine to me it was not a surprise. I've seen more shifts of perspective as a result of equine than probably any other activity that Miraval offers. I think what delighted me was the sense of belonging um, and making a friend. I mean, I think making a sort of a meaningful connection in this day and age is really valuable, and it's just not something I would have thought would be one of the results. And So it was really, I was just delighted to see that and to see that people were connecting over their experience and being able to share. Oftentimes we have travelers, who come on their own, and the opportunity to connect so readily with others is a really important component to the Miraval experience. And I think that one surprised me. But I just all of it was so interesting and reinforcing for, quite honestly, all the colleagues who give so generously of themselves to create this environment and design this experience for individuals to see the impact and someone feeling more, an improved sense of agency, feeling that they have that efficacy. What a great thing to leave with. And it just is inspiring, quite honestly, just inspiring.
Yeah, thank you. I'm watching the comments as you're talking here, and there's some
Oh,
great things being said here.
yeah.
I want to touch back on the solo versus going with a group. I think Tammy, there were a little bit of insight around whether or not you came with somebody or a group or not. Is that correct?
Yes, and I should mention that I'm trying to look at it right now. There were a proportion of guests. I want to say, oh, here we have it. There were about a third of the guests surveyed who came alone, who
Hmm.
traveled by themselves. There were about a third who traveled um, primarily with a partner or a group, and about a third, um, let's see, primarily the partner group about equal. I'm sorry, about a third with a group and about a third with a partner. And so we had a good representation of all, sort of all the kind of different guest experiences. And so folks traveling by themselves are represented in the guests were surveyed, and so they would be included in the average effects that we see. So whether you're traveling alone or with a group, on average, we're seeing these improvements in well-being. The one area where we saw a larger improvement for people traveling with others had to do with improvements in the connection domain.
Hmm.
And so that was, I think, really cool, exciting, and so it kind of makes sense after the pack, but wasn't necessarily something we expected we would be able to pick up on. And so everyone on average did have improvements in that domain. It was simply that if you traveled with others, you had an even larger improvement.
Yeah, thank you. I think we did track a lot of data and components of that data, which some of the questions that we're seeing here are related to that. Whether it's a solo or with a group, etc. So we'll maybe we can catch some highlights of that when we share our summary out later on. One of the things I noticed as we were going through the results there, Tammy, was, your comment about dose response was very interesting. It's an analogy to medication, and it makes me think about, prescribing this kind of thing almost as another way to, make meaningful improvement in your own personal well-being. And so that whole idea is, this is starting to validate that approach that actually now we can point to some scientific data to say, like, actually we can show it, we can prove that it works. Interesting ways. So that's a very interesting path to go down, and just the wording that you use there, draws a lot of analogies to a whole different way of treating some of the things that we've been hearing about stress and that kind of thing. Um, Another comment, and actually, I'm actually curious, Simon, if you have
Yeah.
any deeper insight into the equine effect, because I know that's something that's very close to you, and you've studied that a little bit yourself. Like, what
Yeah.
is your theory for what's behind that? What is the how does that impact take place?
Andrew, it's a great question. It is so unique and individual to each individual what one experiences. But what I would say about the equine experience is that it affords you a shift in perspective, really, on yourself and how you deal with adversity, and through the facilitation one can gain a unique perspective on many of the assumptions that we make about what we are able to do and what we're unable to do in response to meeting adversity. And I think the opportunity to see just ourselves through a new lens is really an opportunity to grow and an opportunity to at some level. be inspired by new possibilities. And I think that that inspiration is one that we all seek and benefit from. And I think that the equine the combination of that facilitation, that perspective, and being close to this magnificent animal that many of us are, don't have the occasion to encounter in our days, is really powerful, and it is the horse's sensitivity as well, which really enables much of the shift, and it just really. It's a powerful experience on so many levels, and I just can't say enough great things about it.
Yeah, that's quite remarkable to listen to and to understand. We don't really understand, what's going on in that equation, except we can see the impact that's having on the
Right.
individuals and on the animals too, which is really quite remarkable. What comes across for me, Simon, as you talk, is how seriously you take this. I mean, this is
Yeah.
not a holiday, this
Right.
is really something that your organization and you, have spent a lot of time working on to kind of fine tune the way in which you interact with guests and the experiences that you create to for the kind of impact that you're looking for. And now we're able to see that come out in sort of scientific measurement, which is amazing. But you really this is a serious undertaking to do this
It
well.
is. It is. Well, I think there's an enormous amount of trust that guests give us when they come and leave their comfort zone and do something new.
Hmm.
And I think that level of trust comes with a tremendous amount of responsibility. And when we think about, experience design, one of the things that was so wonderful to see in the results is that many of the themes of Miraval that we help build our programming around. Um, uh, were highlighted as impacts that people felt, and that just the comments that you shared, Tammy, that were just amazing, were evidence of just that. And I think that I have to say, when we think about experience design, I think that it's applicable not just to the Miraval setting, but to all settings to truly understand how might you engage another in a way that will support their sense of well-being, and in doing so, help create an experience that will be lasting for them.
Yeah, I think there's many opportunities out in the world where that could be improved, and
Yes.
and with a different lens and some data behind it, I think we have
Yeah.
the ability to make some informed choices and decisions about those kinds of things.
I know
I'm
just the
curious.
people, Andrew. I know just the people to do it for you.
Okay. That's good.
You.
That's good. I'm curious if the results had come back not looking so rosy, what would your reaction have been? Like, how would you have handled that if the data had shown maybe the opposite thing that you expected?
Yeah, gosh, I, I have to say, I throughout the entire process, the human team really engendered such a sense of trust in the process that I felt confident that should we get things that we were not anticipating in terms of effect, that we would be able to mine that data to identify what opportunities we have to serve our guests better, and where we were missing the mark, and where we could to improve. So my sense was, though, uh, there would be some level of fear of just embarrassment, and I thought that there would be a small price to pay to truly understand the
Mhm.
impact we're having, and then give us actionable data to form a strategy with. Is an opportunity that I think many businesses would really appreciate the opportunity to have, and I know we did.
Yeah, I mean, I think flying blind, in any sense is not never a great thing,
Right.
right? So you may have instincts and guts, but you don't necessarily know that you're doing the right things. And so having data available that can give you feedback, whether it's positive or negative, I think is always going to be helpful to steering any kind of engagement. Is there any other way you could have done this? Like, I know science worked out here. Is there another type of approach to this that you could imagine that would have given
Uh,
you useful results?
Well, yes, and I quickly dispensed with the possibility, which is that I would sit and interview every guest that came to Miraval, all three properties, and then hand the data to Tammy still. But I think it really is an impossibility to garner this level of insight with this level of sophisticated analysis, and tailored really to our needs, so that the insights are actionable. And I think that yeah, that's a tremendous advantage to have in the pursuit of both garnering new customers and serving those that we already have.
Yeah, wonderful. Tammy, sort of, what's your sort of insight perspective, having gone through this process in an unfamiliar setting, not your typical science study? What are your reflections on the whole experience?
I think back to kind of what I was thinking at the opening, right? Which is just how exciting it is as a scientist. Again, I think a lot of people as professionals and experts in our areas, you kind of get used to your sort of, typical things and to be able to work on something where, where I could really lead with curiosity, and just go in and learn about it as deeply as possible, and then be able to like customize the study, to get at the questions at hand was just really, really exciting and really rewarding as a scientist. I felt kind of like a little kid, um, in a toy shop. And so, yeah, so that was just really, personally rewarding for me, but I also think refreshing, to be able to sort of go into this new frontier, new area of applied science, and really do something new,
Yeah.
for the industry as well. Yeah, so
So,
very exciting.
so is this approach applicable elsewhere? I mean, does it work in other places, other industries? Do you think you could see this working in outside of hospitality and in other service areas? What's your thoughts on that? How would you change things if you were to move into a different industry, for example?
I
Are you
think
asking
that,
me? Oh,
Actually, I was
sorry.
asking
yeah.
Tammy, but
Tammy,
please
please.
jump
Yeah.
in. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think, well-being, science is applicable really everywhere. I don't see limits on it. I think it's, exciting to think of what might be different, for different experiences, different products, different sort of ecosystems. But I think the general method still applies, right? Again, leading with curiosity, trying to understand deeply, what it is, what the experience is, what people are trying to cultivate, what the sort of risks and rewards might be, and then using the tools of science to methodically measure and assess. So yeah,
yeah. That's
I think
exciting
it's
for us to
applicable
contemplate.
to everything, and I think it's really important, to also to measure and really try to get at the truth of what is happening, rather than relying, solely on our sort of, um, just first impressions, or the sort of satisfaction. Like you might be satisfied in the moment, but like what are the real rewards? What are the real impacts sort of down the line? I think is critical for any industry.
Yeah. Simon, you were going to make a comment, weren't you?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Tammy. I think, having relied upon overhearing guests talking about their stay in the lobby before they left, as the primary method of information gathering, I'm glad that is the dark ages. So it really is one of the more exciting opportunities that I personally have had within my career, and I know it has energized the Miraval community tremendously. So I feel a tremendous sense of gratitude to you both.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity to work on this, Simon and team at Miraval. It took take a big team. There was a lot of effort behind the scenes, that was on both sides of the house here to really make this success, and it took quite a bit of time and effort to recruit and design and collect data, analyze data. Several folks on the call here with us that were part of this for the whole journey. Um, and very gratifying to see it come together in such a powerful way with insights that we probably wouldn't have been able to see any other way. I mean, it really has opened a window into Miraval, into the result experience that we just couldn't see through before. And I think that's such an exciting way to kind of apply science out in the world, and something that Human is really trying to put into more places. So. I think we're getting close to our time here. There's a lot of questions. We definitely won't be able to answer any of them. I don't know if any of those questions people want to tackle here, but I think it's probably something we'll have to follow up on anything you saw go by, Tammy, that you want to respond to? Or
I want to. I've been seeing them trickle in. I'm like, oh yes, I could. These are things we could continue to talk about.
yeah,
And I think we can follow up. We can also point folks to the report. There is a lot
thank
of
you.
this
Yeah,
information, a lot of the answers to the questions in the chat are in that report, which I believe is linked in the initial email. So please look for that detailed case study report. It has all of this info should be in there.
yeah. I want to thank all the guests who have shown up today, both those who are here with us right now and those who are going to watch the recording or had to drop off a little bit early. The case study that goes with this is going to be on our website at humin.org. If you look under the organizations tab, you'll find that link. And the recording will be sent out, as Tammy said, to anybody who registered, so that you'll get that very soon. Yeah, we hope that this has provided a little bit more information to everyone about how well-being and the real world can interact, how science can add a new lens. It's not the only way to do this kind of work, but it is a new and I think an exciting way to add more detail to our understanding of the world and to ultimately support people's well-being and help people, thrive in a world that can be challenging, as we know, at times. So, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks very much.